Welcome back. Let's now write our very first line of code and build our very first and very small web page. So here we are back in VS Code, and let's now close all of this up. And then we're going here to this first tab, so this Explorer tab. So in VS Code, we always need to be inside of some folder, and that folder is called the project folder. Now, right now, we don't have any folder started yet, and so let's actually start by doing that. And I will create a folder right here on my desktop. So basically, I will do all the coding will always happen here on my desktop, but of course, you can also do it in any other place on your computer. This one doesn't really matter. For me, it's just easier to have it on the desktop. And I'm calling this folder here 01 and test. Okay, so let's go back here and now click on open folder. And so going to my desktop, I will now select this folder that I just created. And so this 01 test is now our project folder. So you see we get a new welcome screen, and here we can click on new file to add our very first file to the project. Or we could also do this by hovering here over this left sidebar and clicking here on the new file icon. So these are two different ways of creating new files in the project folder. And I actually prefer this one here. So we are about to create our very first web page. And a web page is basically just an HTML file. And let's call it index.html. So it's basically just a file with the HTML file extension. And we are calling it index because that is the default name of the first page of any website. So index is basically always the entry point to any website. And so all web projects always need to have an index.html. All right, so keep that in mind. Always call your very first page index.html. Now, my goal in this lecture is not yet to really teach you HTML. Right now, all I want to do is to create this file and to add a little bit of code to it and then see the result in the browser. Just so you get to write your first line of code and are able to see the result of writing that code in a real web browser. So again, I'm not really starting to teach HTML just yet. And so instead of writing a whole page structure as we usually need to, we are going to use a small cheat that we can use in VS Code. So to do that, just write an exclamation mark. So just like this. And then you can hit Tab on your keyboard, or you can also just click here. And with that, we get this very basic and almost empty HTML structure. So it has a head and it has a body. But once again, we will learn all about that a little bit later. For now, all I'm interested here is, for now, this title of the web page. So let's change the content here of this title to, for example, my first web page. But of course, you can also write something else here. And then let's go inside of the body. So this is actually the part that we will be able to see in the browser. And here, just write this less than sign, then H1, which stands for heading 1, and then the greater than symbol. So just like this one here. And you see that then VS Code actually automatically placed this other part here, so closing the H1 basically. But again, that doesn't really matter for now. Let's just write some text content in here, and I'm writing hello world, which is kind of a standard when you write your very first line of code in any programming language. So hello world is really a long-standing tradition. Next, let's try another one. So again, this less than symbol. Now let's try P, which stands for paragraph. And then again, VS Code automatically closes the paragraph for us. So let's say my name is Jonas, and you will of course use your own name. And this is my very first web page. Okay, now we can give it a save by hitting Command or Control S, or you can go here to the File menu as well. And we also have the autosave active. So if we just leave this tab, so for example by clicking outside here, then it will also automatically save the file. So let's actually try that. And here we go. So now the file has been saved, and maybe you also noticed that the formatting has changed here a little bit. And this happened because of the Prettier extension that we installed in the last video. So remember that the Prettier extension is to format our code automatically whenever we save it. And so that is exactly what just happened. So let's just add some spaces here. And now if I hit Command or Control S again, then you see it put it back in the correct place. All right. And so that's the power of Prettier, and it will ensure that your code should always look the same as this code in the video. Great. So we just wrote our very first line of code, or actually our first 2 lines of code. And so now we have this index.html file, and we can open it up in a browser. So let's go to our project folder where this file is located. And in my case, remember that's on the desktop. So I can just open it. And now here we have that index.html file that we created previously in VS Code. And to now open it up in Google Chrome or in any other browser, we just need to double click the file, or we can just also right click it and then open with Google Chrome. So let's do that. And here it is. Here is our very first web page that we just created manually in VS Code. Great. And that's really amazing if you ask me. So congratulations and well done on your very first web page here. Let's just push it to the side here a little bit, and then VS Code to the other side. So from now on, we will always have our code here on the left side, and then on the right side the browser, so that we can see our changes. And to give us a bit more space here, we can again click on this tab here, and that will then collapse this sidebar and give us more space for our actual code. So you see that here we have this hello world in big and bold text, and so that corresponds here to this H1 element. And then below that we have this paragraph, which is translated here into this visual element. We also have the actual title of the page here in the title of this tab. So my first web page is what we have here, and that is exactly what we typed here into the title element, right? And so one more time, the code that we wrote here in our HTML document is now reflected in the real world in this real web browser. And speaking of the web browser, I'm using Google Chrome to test all the code that we're going to write throughout this course. And so I really advise you to also use Google Chrome to always test the code that you are writing. So that will again ensure that you have the exact same results as you are seeing in the course videos. Okay, and this is actually enough for this very first coding video. And I hope that you really got the ideas that I wanted to show you in this lecture. So basically starting from creating a project folder, then opening up that project folder in VS Code. So in this folder here, the test folder, then inside of that creating an HTML file, then adding some code to that file, and finally opening up the HTML document in a real browser such as Google Chrome, where we then see this result. So basically the translation of our code to a visual result. So I hope that you had some fun doing this, and I see you in the next video. Now, one of the things that you need in order to go through this course is to get access to some starter files for each of the sections in this course. And so in this video, let me very quickly show you how you can access those files. So the entire starter files, as well as the final files for each of the sections of the course, are hosted in this so-called repository on GitHub. And GitHub is basically a code platform where most developers upload their code to in order to share it, or to collaborate with other developers, or simply to store it. So a repository is basically a folder which contains a bunch of code or other files. And each repository can be accessed by a URL. And this repository is available on this URL here. But don't worry, you don't have to type that in. So I included this link in this lecture on Udemy, and it should also be in the very first text lecture of this section. So I'm sure that you can find this link here, so this URL, somewhere in this lecture. So just click that, and then you will end up on this exact same repository. So in this repository, as I mentioned, we have all the starter files, and for each of the sections of the course, there is one folder. For example, the next section, which are the HTML fundamentals, contains all of these images and also this text document. Okay. I also included the final code for each of the sections so that you can always compare your own code to the code that I'm writing in the videos. And this will be very important so that you can compare your code to mine in case that you have any mistakes in your code. So comparing your code to mine like this will always be your easiest way of finding mistakes, so of finding errors that you are maybe typing in your code. And that will happen for sure. It happens to all beginners. And so in that situation, you can just get access to the final code. Finally, down here, there is also this written document which contains these most frequently asked questions. So before actually starting the course, it might be a good idea to quickly read through these questions. That should only take you like 3 minutes, but I'm sure it will help you clear some doubts that you might get as you go through the course. But anyway, what we really came here to is to actually get access to the code, right? And so to download this code, all we have to do is to click here on this green button, and then down here, choosing the download zip option. And now this should probably take some time because there are a lot of images here. And so let's just wait for this download to finish. Okay, and that download just finished. Now let's go back to the desktop or wherever you are working. And then let's simply put those files that we just downloaded there. All right. So then we need to extract this zip archive. And on a Mac, you just have to double click that file. And on Windows, you just right click and then extract all. Okay, so we don't need that anymore. And now let's quickly open up this folder just so we can see that it is indeed the exact same files that we just saw on GitHub. So we have the starter files, and here the files for the next section, and then also the final files. And so now with these starter files in place, we are actually ready to start learning HTML in the next section. Now, before leaving this getting started section, let me give you 8 quick considerations on how to actually take this course. And I promise that they are super short and super important. So please, please don't skip this video. It will set you up for success with this course. So to start, chances are that this is your very first contact with writing code. And so please don't get overwhelmed. I have literally seen tens of thousands of students going through this course or one of my other courses, And I can tell you that it's 100% normal that in the beginning you will not really understand everything. So just keep going through these first few sections, even if you don't understand 100% at first. You will very soon, believe me, that's just normal. Just don't think something like, I guess coding is not for me. So that thought is simply not allowed here. Also, keep in mind that everyone has different learning speeds, and so you will get there eventually. Just keep following the course and keep practicing as much as you can. Now, about actually taking the course, you always need to code along with me. And this is absolutely fundamental. You will learn exactly 0 HTML and CSS skills by simply sitting there and watching me code. So you really have to actually write the code yourself, even if you're just typing the exact same words as I am typing basically in the video. But it really doesn't matter. As long as you're coding, the code is getting into your brain and you're learning. And so that's all that matters. If you want the course material to stick in your brain even better, then take notes. So notes on code syntax, notes on theory concepts, and really notes on everything. You can't take too many notes. Now everyone has their own style, so just find your own one. Next, try all the coding challenges that I present you. Try to do the best that you can, but if you get stuck for too long for some reason, just go ahead and watch the solution. So again, you have to try the coding challenges. Otherwise, you will miss a lot of the learning opportunity here. And also, don't beat yourself up if you can't figure out the solution. Again, this is completely normal, especially if you're just a beginner. Trust me. So if that happens, just rewatch the lectures that were covered in that challenge, try to understand them a bit better, and then move on. Now, the sections in the course build on one another. And so before moving on from a section to the next one, really make sure that you understand exactly what was covered in that section. So take a break, review the code that we wrote, review your notes, and also review the projects that we built in that section, if there was any. You should even try to come up with your own examples and write some code on your own in order to practice. And only then you are really ready to move on to the next section. Now, if you have a question or an error in your code, always start by trying to solve the error by yourself. This is absolutely essential for your progress and your learning journey, because one of the main things that a developer has to do is to find and fix errors, or bugs, as we also call them. Now, if you can't solve the problem, then go ahead and check out the Q&A section here on Udemy, because probably someone else already had the same problem before. If that also doesn't help, then of course you can ask a new question. To do that, use a short description, post your code on codepen.io, and share the link in the Q&A. So don't just paste a wall of code into the Q&A, but instead please use a service such as codepen.io. Next, I just wanted to quickly mention that I recorded this course on a Mac, but everything is going to work the exact same way on Windows or on Linux. So if something doesn't work on your computer, it's not because you're using a different operating system, okay? And now, finally, and you could say even most importantly, have fun while doing this course. Coding is a lot of fun, and it's so rewarding to see something that you have built yourself. So if for some reason you're feeling frustrated, then just stop whatever you're doing and come back later. So again, you always need to have fun while coding. And with all this being said, Let's now finally get started.